Hello, this is GeoTechland. Let's take a look at what is new in the world of tech. AMD's new Radeon 6600XT offers 1080p gaming for $379. The interesting thing about this GPU is the pricing, because when you think about it, for $379, you're only getting a GPU that's meant for 1080p gaming. Whereas back in the day, a few years ago, before the chip shortage, you could get a GPU for 1080p gaming for under $300. Most recently, I purchased my 5600XT GPU for about $280, and that allows for 1440p gaming at 60 Hz per second, probably around high settings for most games. It just goes to show you how the chip shortage has affected GPUs, and just in general, it's not the best time for building a PC or upgrading your hardware. Although if you are really needing to play newer games at 1080p and you want a GPU that is more open source friendly, then AMD is still the way to go. Mastodon now has officially released their iPhone app. So recently I put out a video testing the beta version of this app, and now you can get it if you're using an iOS device and test it out yourself. Overall, my thoughts are that the app is very good, very nicely designed. A couple things that it could improve on, though, is that there is no dedicated button for looking at your DMs. Right now, it looks like the only real way to access your DMs is by going to the notifications and just seeing where you've been mentioned. And if you wanted to compose a direct message, start typing a post and set the privacy settings to just be visible to the person that you're mentioning, which is going to make things very confusing. Imagine getting mixed up when you're thinking you're having a private message with a public message. So that could be a problem there. I think it's just should be standard on any social media app to have a direct messages button. And then the other thing that's been generating some controversy is the fact that instead of having a local and federated timeline, there's a discover page, where you can see what's trending all across the Mastodon Fediverse, and also who to follow, like suggestions on who to follow. And that's it. So there is no dedicated button to see local and federated timelines. And for local timelines, when you can see posts, I think that's a very useful feature. It serves as like a sort of bulletin board of the specific local community that you're a part of. Now, as for the federated timeline, I definitely agree that seeing a bunch of unfiltered posts all at once that are almost like or moving so fast is not really a good experience. And that's the one where I would totally be okay with it being a filtered experience, with the follow suggestions and what's trending hashtags. But I still feel like there should be a local feed where you can just see who's posting in your community. And maybe once instances get bigger, and that starts to not be a good experience anymore, then maybe they can enable like an interface like that where you can see what's trending locally and who to follow locally. I think that would be a good idea. It seems like part of why Mastodon decided to remove the sort of unfiltered federated timeline especially is that there needed to be some sort of filter to filter out inappropriate content as part of Apple's policy. So Apple has been requiring social network apps to limit what users can find through their apps. Reddit iOS app, for instance, makes you opt into NSFW content through the web. So that's another reason why they removed that federated timeline. But overall, I'm glad that there is an official Mastodon app. It should at least be really useful in bringing new users, or at least making it easier for new users to join Mastodon. If you're enjoying my content, you can subscribe to me on YouTube, EarTube, follow me on Odyssey. You can also support me on LiberaPay, Patreon, and by shopping at Earth Hero. See links in the description below. Elon Musk has recently been taking some shots at Apple's Appstore fees, calling them a de facto global tax on the internet. And it seems like Elon Musk is praising Epic and saying that they are right with their case against them. So Epic's been on this legal battle with Apple, saying that their App Store rules that allow Apple to take 30% commission on many transactions in the App Store are unfair and anti-competitive. And they're right that Apple, I think, is taking way too much. I understand why Apple has that fee because, they want to get paid for hosting all the apps there. I just don't think it should be 30%. That just seems way too much. Like maybe like 5%, 10% seems more reasonable. And I feel like that should be the industry standard. And especially on iOS devices where you can install alternative applications or alternative stores. So I agree with Epic on this. And speaking of Apple does like to build themselves as a privacy alternative to Google and Android. But it looks like they may have a blind spot in one area here. So recently, the California Consumer Privacy Act passed that gives California residents the right to tell websites not to sell their personal data. But in practice, that would mean clicking through a bunch of privacy policies and cookie notices one by one on every site you visit. And so there's been talk about creating this sort of global do not track option where you can just enable it and it flips on for all the websites you visit. You could already do this to some degree with browsers and getting certain add-ons like a DuckDuckGo add-on, but it looks like Apple hasn't enabled this feature in Safari. And so this is something that they could improve on here. I'm not sure why they haven't enabled this in Safari. I mean, it seems like it would be a sure thing coming from them in the future. I don't see why they couldn't add it to Safari, so we'll see where that goes. But for now, it looks like that is one blind spot that they have when it comes to their privacy reputation here. And then more Apple news is that workers at a repair facility used by Apple compare conditions to sweatshops. A report describes few bathrooms and no AC at the Houston facility. Now this headline only refers to Apple, but it looks like it's a Texas facility that processes repairs for Apple, Dell, and Lenovo. So it's not just Apple specific. The working conditions allege that CSAT took some employees by surprise, according to Insider, as they expected an environment reflective of the prestige that comes with the Apple brand. Instead, they reportedly faced quotas that were difficult to meet and pay that ranged from $12 to $14 an hour, with little hope for raises or promotions. Some employees told Insider that they had to work 60 hours a week just to make ends meet. I'm not actually surprised by this news, especially with tech companies in general. Unfortunately, a lot of the manufacturing is outsourced to China, and so they're essentially already doing a lot of labor in sweatshop conditions. So of course, if these companies decided to bring some type of repair or even manufacturing to the US, they would do so to try to compete with the outsourced labor. Of course, working conditions won't be the best. That's why I try to support companies that treat their workers better and have better working conditions. I feel like they pick on Apple more because Apple likes to brand themselves the most of being very socially conscious, socially friendly. And so that's why I think they get a little bit more of the heat here. Google Play gets mandatory app privacy labels in April 2022. It looks like Google is following Apple's footsteps in introducing privacy labels for apps, which I think is a very good thing because at least you're going to know what you're getting yourself into, and it's going to highlight how much apps violate your privacy. And that's why a lot of these apps that you get are free, because they're just tracking you and trying to sell your data to advertisers. Of course, on Android, I feel like with the Google Play services, they're already collecting way too much data, let alone with any specific apps here. Google relies on advertising as like a big part of its business. I don't know if you could say that on Android you'll have the best privacy. Maybe Google will try to divest from data tracking and their advertising business, but I just don't see that happening anytime soon. Lutris 0.5.9 beta released with Epic Games Store support and a few other updates. So it seems that Lutris is getting much better at supporting the Epic Games Store, which is a good thing. I know a lot of people in the community have their issues with Epic Games. They seem to be much more anti-Linux, but I think overall this is a good thing. As much as I appreciate everything that Steam is doing to make gaming on Linux a possibility, I also don't want it to be the only player in the Linux world. But I'm hoping that when Steam pushes forward with gaming on Linux, that it'll eventually incentivize Epic Games and even GOG to release their storefronts on Linux officially. Maybe they'd go about it a different way. Maybe they might make them available on FlatHub. That would surely be nice. You have reached the end of this episode. If you like this content, tune in next week for some more awesome tech news.